Colored clouds scatter easily. Glass is fragile, all sweet dreams wait too soon. Colored clouds scatter easily. Glass is fragile, and sweet dreams always end far too soon. Fool Lily was only 12 when she was taken to Marshall Lay's mansion. At 12, a girl ought to be carefree, running wild and getting into mischief. Yet she was unusually quiet and well-behaved. Even the stern Mr. Lay softened at the sight of her, afraid of frightening her. Truth be told, she hadn't always been like this. As the young lady of the esteemed Fu family, she had once been doted on and cherished. But those happy days were cut short. In an age of war and chaos, a single accident could alter a lifetime. Before her mother passed away, she had exhausted every effort to arrange for Mr. Lay to take Lily in. He never skimped on her food, clothing, or comforts. Her life was no worse than it had been in the Fu residence. Still, she was living under someone else's roof, and things would never be the same again. The Lay family had 3 children. The elder toward daughters Lay Nuo was the youngest, 4 years older than Fu Lily. She called him third brother. At 16, Lay Nuo was tall and lean, with sharp, delicate features, but there was an edge in his eyes that made him seem unapproachable. She was a little afraid of him, and would take detours whenever she saw him from afar. Yet one day, he sought her out on his own. He must have done something to anger his father, for Mr. Lay had confined him to the mansion in a fit of rage. She was returning from class when they ran into each other in the corridor. She lowered her head and whispered, "Third brother." He scowled, his brows tightly furrowed, and didn't even glance at her. But after walking a few steps forward, he suddenly seemed to remember something. He spun around sharply and called out to her, "Lily." She jumped, froze for a few seconds, then turned around and stared at him blankly. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the sky glowing bright red. Her face was illuminated clearly, her dark eyes like a young deer in the woods, nervous and a little guarded. Lay Nuo was amused. He grinned crookedly and beckoned her over. Fu Lily blinked at him, hesitated for a moment, then walked toward him. "Third brother." "Afraid of third brother?" he teased deliberately. She pressed her lips together and shook her head, but her small hands were already clenched tight. Lay Nuo noticed this quietly, leaned down, and said gently, "Lily, do third brother a favor, and he'll take you out to play." He bent his head and whispered something in her ear. It was the first time they had been so close. He smelled of fresh mint, cool and overwhelming, wrapping around her completely. When he finished, he straightened up, stuffed his hands into his pockets, and looked at her lazily with a smile playing on his lips. In the hazy sunlight, his face was impossibly gentle. She steeled herself and, under his gaze, knocked on the door of Mr. Lay's study. "Uncle Lay, I'd like to go outside and look around." Eldest sister said the maple leaves beyond the harbor are beautiful this time of year. She repeated exactly what Lay Nuo had told her. Mr. Lay agreed readily. "Very well. You'll have someone take you." "Uncle Lay." Her heart was pounding. She was terribly nervous. "Could third brother take me instead?" Lay Nuo shot her a surprised glance, and laughed in exasperation. This little rascal. It was the first time she had asked Mr. Lay for anything in 2 years at the Lay mansion. Seeing her anxious, uneasy expression, his heart softened. This girl should have been spoiled rotten, just like any other child. "Have Adjutant Su accompany you," he said. With the task done, Fu Lily let out a sigh of relief. October brought beautiful scenery, sunset like brocade, red maples covering the hills. Lay Nuo had been a little annoyed that Adjutant Zu was tagging along. But when he saw her leaning against the car window, eyes shining, looking at everything with childlike wonder, he cowed and helped smiling. He looked up and ordered to stop the car. The vehicle pulled over by the road, and he took her strolling down the long street. She was still a little girl at heart, fascinated by everything she saw. She didn't say much, but her eyes were fixed on each new sight, full of surprise and delight. Lei and Yuo lead her to an old man making sugar figurines and asked him to blow a little monkey for her. She stood watching, eyes wide, her long eyelashes like butterflies about to take flight. He stood beside her, staring at her, and gradually lost himself in thought. She held the sugar figurine, sucking on it slowly, reluctant to finish it. Lei and Yuo hated seeing her like this. He was a privileged young master, born with everything he ever wanted, never having known hardship. But with her, he felt an inexplicable urge to protect her, to give her all the good things in the world. He took her hand and drank with her, watching magic shows at the tea house, queuing for freshly baked buns, buying newly released chocolate from the foreign store. Her hands were full, her forehead glistening with sweat, and her heart was lighter than it had been since her family fell apart. How is it? Lang Yuo turned to look at her. Happy following, third brother? She nodded with a smile, her eyes bright as if holding stars. Seeing her like this filled him with a strange pride, and he teased her without thinking if you're happy, said third brother. His face was so close to hers, his narrow almond eyes slanting upward, breathtakingly handsome. Her heart skipped a beat. She whispered softly, third brother. At the sound, Lei Yuo's eyes lit up, and he laughed loudly. That day, she lost count of how many places he took her, how many new things she saw. He even brought her to the opera house. It was late, the street lights just turning on. She was a little scared, worried Mr. Lei would be angry. But Lei Yuo didn't care. He tapped her forehead lightly, looking all glum like an old lady. Ugly. She looked up at him, still frowning. He laughed at her and eased, whatever happens, third brother will take responsibility. I won't let you suffer. At that moment he stood on the bustling street, neon lights flashing, crowds noisy, the whole world alive, and in her eyes, there was only his arrogant, gentle face. And so, the two of them truly grew close. In those 2 years, he took her out to play many times. On several occasions, he even snuck her into parades with students, pretending to be progressive youths attending meetings and poetry societies, denouncing warlords and cursing Mr. Lei. Lily sat below, terrified, afraid they would be recognized and beaten or thrown out. But Lei Yuo acted as if he didn't care at all. His almond eyes half-minus closed, posture relaxed. Speaking only occasionally, he didn't look like a progressive youth in the slightest. There was a carelessness about him, a sense that even if the sky fell, it wouldn't bother him, a quality no one else possessed. Leaving the poetry society, he picked up a broken bicycle by the wall and rode her through the late autumn streets. Fallen leaves lay thick on the ground, crunching under the wheels. A soft breeze blew, leaves swirling down from the sky. Sunlight so bright it stung the eyes. She tugged at his clothes and shouted, "Their brother," faster. He looked back at her, a mischievous smile on his lips. Faster. Before she could nod, he suddenly let go of the handlebars, spreading his arms wide as the bike sped downhill. Her eyes widened, and she let out a scream, throwing her arms tightly around his waist. He smiled and deliberately swerved the bike from side to side. Fool Lily clung to him without daring to let go. He called out loudly ahead. "Want to go even faster? Coward, but..." Sunlight poured down overhead, blazing bright on their faces, making it hard to keep their eyes open. Just like those years dazzling as gold, the most brilliant days of their lives. Living with Lei Yuo those 2 years, Fu Lily became more cheerful and closer to him than to anyone else. Madame Lei watched quietly, and sometimes teased her in this huge mansion. Everyone is afraid of that rascal, only Yuo aren't scared of him. She didn't catch the hidden meaning in Madame Lei's words, and smiled shyly. "Third brother is very kind." Madame Lei smiled, turned, and patted her cheek gently. Not long after, Lily came home and stepped into the living room, only to hear Madame Lei speaking behind a screen. "I think Lily really likes the third young master. He's always been mischievous. I can never tell what he's thinking. Why don't you ask him?" Her heart jolted violently, her ears burning hot. Her secret teenage feelings had been laid bare. Embarrassed and flustered, she froze in place, not knowing whether to stay or go. "You worry too much? How old is she? Let's wait and see. The situation outside is unstable these days. Tonight, tell the third young master, Mr. Lee said. From the corridor came the thud of leather shoes. Adjutant's footsteps, it seemed. Fu Lily's heart was about to leap out of her chest. She dared not listen any longer, and turned to walk the other way. Back in her room, she leaned against the door, her heart racing uncontrollably. All she could think of was Madame Lay's words. She didn't understand what Madame Lay meant, only that her mind was in chaos, filled with panic. She tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of her mother. In the dream, her mother was young again, wearing a jade-green keybound pearl earrings, a faint smile in her eyes. She was breathtakingly beautiful, destined for a better life, yet she had willingly stood by her father, clinging to the sweet dream of one lifetime, one love. When her father was alive, he had protected her and her mother, and no one dared bully them. After his death, from grandmother Fu down to the housekeepers, everyone insulted them. The vast Fu mansion had no room for a mother and daughter. Mother, Fu Lily reached out, grabbing at empty air, then jolted awake. The room was dim, only a sliver of moonlight streaming through the window, falling softly on the bed like her mother's gentle gaze in a dream. She buried her face in the quilt and cried loudly. For the next few days, she made excuses to avoid the main hall, afraid of running into Lei and Yuo and Madame Lei. Probably from overthinking and catching a cold at night, she suddenly fell ill. Outside, chaos reigned. Newspapers reported every day that war between the North and South was imminent, and groups of protesting students were being arrested. Mr. Lei was swamped with official business, and Lei and Yuo had gone to Shuangqiao for a meeting. Not wanting to be a burden at such a time, she kept her illness to herself. At first, she only had a fever and chills, but then a rash broke out on her body, spreading in patches from her neck downward. When Lei and Yuo returned from the meeting in Shuangqiao, he saw freshly roasted chestnuts on the street and thought of her. He told the driver to stop and bought a bag still warm when he brought it home. He went straight to her room without stopping by the main hall. Pushing the door open, he was shocked. She lay on the bed in thin clothes, her face twisted in pain. Unnaturally flushed, red spots dotting the skin visible to the eye. Lily, he rushed to the bed in one stride. Fu Lily's heart had already turned to mush. Seeing him beside her, her eyes immediately reddened. She pouted and called, "Third brother." She had always been shy, with a timid reserve, holding back even at her happiest. Never had she acted so coquettish and fragile. That single third brother made his heart sink uncontrollably. "What's wrong? Did you call a doctor?" He sat by the bed, touched her forehead, and his eyes widened. "You're burning up." Fu Lily shook her head and reached to scratch her shoulder. "Nonsense," he frowned and quickly held her hand down. His sharp tone made her tears spill over. Her clear eyes filled with water, shining brighter than ever. Her distinct eyelashes like butterfly wings wet with rain, pitiful and lovely beyond words. He softened his voice at once, coaxing her, "Be good, Lily. Third brother didn't mean to scold you. But you're being silly. How can you be this sick and not see a doctor?" She lowered her eyes and said nothing. Now that he was here, her heart strangely calmed, as if she had found support, knowing someone would take care of her. Lei and Yuo called for a doctor. Only then did Madame Lei learn she was ill. After the doctor examined her, prescribed medicine, and left, Madame Lei lost her temper, scolding the servants for neglecting her. Finally, she turned her attention back to Fu Lily. This child is sick this badly and says nothing, waiting for someone to find her. Even a guest wouldn't be so distant. Lei and Yuo turned his head and looked deeply in her direction. In the days that followed, Lei and Yuo visited her room every day. He was a young master who had always been waited on hand and foot, never having tended to anyone before. Fu Lily was the first. Her illness was severe. The fever came and went for days, and she slept most of the time. Whenever she woke up, Lei and Yuo was always there. Sometimes he sat by the bed, legs crossed, looking lazy and unruly. Sometimes he paced the room, frowning as if impatient. Sometimes he napped in a chair, sunlight falling on his face, impossibly gentle. She lay in bed watching him quietly, filled with endless contentment and joy, even thinking it was worth falling ill. Once, she woke up as he was wiping her face with a towel. Opening her eyes, she saw his face right in front of her, as every eyelash clear. They stared at each other silently, both frozen. Light shifted, and the air suddenly grew warm. Her heart pounded faster and faster in her chest. Her thin lips were pressed together, like rose petals still damp with morning dew. His heart tightened, he almost kissed her. "Third brother," she spoke first, her voice still hoarse from recovering from illness. The call brought him back to his senses. He hummed in response and straightened up. "Hungry?" She nodded. Soup, congee, and side dishes were always kept ready in the kitchen. At Lady O's order, a servant brought them quickly. He held the bowl and fed her himself. The clumsy young master had never done such delicate, patient work. He blew on the hot congee twice before putting the spoon to her mouth. She took a bite, her mouth burning numb. Before she could recover, he fed her another spoonful. Seeing her frown in pain, Lei and Yuo asked in confusion, "Is it that bad?" He scooped up a spoonful and ate it himself. The moment it touched his tongue, his face scrunched up, and he nearly dropped the bowl. "Boo!" Illy cowed and helped, laughing at his flustered expression. "You've gone silly from the fever." He snapped at her once he recovered. "Why didn't you say it was too hot?" He looked up and saw her curved eyes and faint dimples. She had lost weight, but her eyes were brighter than ever, light gathering in her brows, her side profile delicate and gentle. His heart was brushed by a warm spring breeze, soft and fluttering. He tapped her nose lightly. "You did that on purpose, didn't you?" "Third brother is just clumsy." She lifted her long eyelashes. "Huh. Getting bold now." He glanced at her sideways. "You've learned to talk back." "Ate." Madame Lei came to visit Fu Lily. Reaching the door, she saw Lei and Yuo sitting on the bed, legs crossed, healing a pear, with a pile of snacks beside him. Even she, his own mother, had never imagined that the third young master of the Lei family would condescend to care for someone so earnestly. She stared for a long time, then turned and left. On the way, she called on help, asking Adjutancy, "Tell me, is this a good thing or a bad thing?" Adjutancy knew everything about Fu Lila's situation, but how could he explain the complicated truth? He thought for a moment and replied, "Didn't you always hope for this, madam?" Madame Lei sighed. "I did. The Fu family's secret key cannot fall into anyone else's hands. But seeing Lei and Yuo like this, I'm truly worried." All in all, the time Fu Lily was ill was a rare period of peace. Soon, chaos erupted outside. Newspapers reported the worsening situation every day. It was an age of warlord scuffles, with every faction ready to make a move and seize power. After Fu Lily recovered, Lei and Yuo joined the military. Even Mr. Lei returned to his Tianjin mansion, leaving only her and Madame Lei in the Maishan residence. She had never eaten the bag of chestnuts Lei and Yuo had brought back, having wandered since childhood, then living under someone else's roof like duckweed on water. She had never felt a sense of security. Lei and Yuo had taken root in her heart. Only by holding on to him could she feel steady and belonged. Now that he was gone, she stubbornly clung to the things he had left her. Later, the chestnuts went moldy, and a servant threw them away while cleaning. It was the first time she had ever lost her temper at someone. The servants whispered about it for days, saying Miss Fu had lost her mind. When Madame Lei heard, she sighed deeply. The next day at dinner, she chatted with her, subtly reminding her to see things clearly, to understand, and not to be too infatuated. Pride goes before a fall. Deep love never lasts. When Fu Lily was 19, Lei and Yuo returned from the military. That day, she had been shopping with Lei's eldest daughter. When they came back, she saw a man in military uniform standing in the living room. Tall and straight, Fu Lily recognized him at once. Lei and Yuo turned around, and their eyes met. 2 years apart, she had grown even more beautiful, wearing a pearl-gray water-pattern satin dress, her hair styled in a high bun, adorned only with a small jasmine flower, fresh and elegant. At the sight of him, she still looked like a little girl, eyes wide, a little dazed. "What? Don't recognize third brother anymore? He teased. At the sound of his voice, her nose stung, warmth rushing to her eyes. Afraid of being seen, she quickly lowered her gaze and whispered third brother. That soft call made his heart ache and soften at the same time. The eldest sister looked at him meaningfully. Everyone in the family knew Fu Lili was going to marry him. She was the only one kept in the dark. There was a banquet for guests at the mansion that evening. She disliked crowds and felt awkward, so she slipped away when she got the chance. When Lei Yuo came out, she was sitting under the cherry blossom tree in the yard. It was early spring, and the night air was bitterly cold. She hugged her knees on the steps, staring up at the moon in a daze, pink cherry blossoms falling around her. She turned to look at him, third brother. He sat down beside her. Ain't you cold? She shook her head, her dark eyes fixed on him. Third brother has been drinking? He stretched his long legs, leaned back against the tree, cherry blossoms falling in his hair and on his face. He squinted and looked at her quietly. Have you been happy these years at the Lei mansion? Fool. Hilly didn't understand what he meant. Her heart skipped a beat. With him here, she was indeed happy. Yes. He smiled, really. She looked at him in confusion, sensing something was off about him tonight. What's wrong, third brother? Third brother wants you to be happy forever. His eyes were hazy. He had definitely drunk too much. Yet, his heart was clearer than ever. And because it was so clear, it hurt unbearably. What was he supposed to do with this silly girl? After that night, Fu Lili could feel them growing distant. Lei Yuo had always been the one to initiate contact once he stopped seeking her out. She had no chance to see him. Madame Lei said he was busy with official business, spending most of his time working in Shuangqiao. Hearing this explanation, Fu Lili panicked. She remembered Madame Lei's words to Mr. Lei years ago and felt utterly embarrassed. Madame Lei seemed to understand everything. She patted her hand and said, the third young master is old enough to start a family. Lily, you've been with us all these years. We've long regarded you as our own daughter. As for you and the third young master, if you have no objections, your Uncle Lei and I will arrange it, all right? She stared at Madame Lei with wide eyes. The woman's expression was serious, not joking in the slightest. Her heart was filled with shock, chaos, and joy. Her hands hurt from clenching them. After a long while, she said slowly, what about third brother? What does he say? Parents' orders, matchmaker's words. If you agree, I will handle it. A few days later, Lei Yuo returned from Shuangqiao. He first went to Mr. Lei's study to discuss his marriage to Lily. He asked his father, did she agree of her own free will? She forced. Mr. Lei looked up at him, his gaze sharp. What difference does it make? Marrying you is her only choice. His father was right, yet a nameless feeling lingered in his chest. He wanted Fu Lili to be happy to marry him, but that happiness was nothing but a bubble destined to burst. He had never known he could care for someone this deeply, so much that his heart ached at the mere thought of her. The Fu clan controls the south, the Sun clan intends to march north, and the Murong family watches hungrily from the sidelines. Lei looked at his only son. We are surrounded by enemies. You must understand this. Small battles depended on men, great wars depended on will. They had to obtain the secret key in Fu Lila's hands, and they had to fight this war. In years of endless war, it was either kill or be killed. For everything else, they would have to take it one step at a time. Leaving his father's study, he walked down the stairs. She was arranging flowers with her back to him, sunlight falling on her shoulders, outlining her soft silhouette. He stood there watching her silently. After a long while, she seemed to sense his gaze and turned around. Seeing him staring at her, her heart skipped a beat, and her cheeks flushed. Third brother. He walked down and glanced at the flowers she had arranged. You'll soon be better than mother. She smiled shyly. Don't tease me, third brother. He reached out and touched her head. Go out with eldest sister more often. Buy some new clothes. She looked up at him with dark eyes, thinking he must know. Was he happy about it? She opened her mouth to ask, but footsteps approached. Well, hiding here whispering together. It was Lei's eldest daughter. She was solemnly stood beside her, smiling at them. She turned to her daughter and said as the elder sister, "Don't tease your future sister minus and minus law. Look at you taking her side already, before she's even married into the family." Phoo. Lily stood to the side, her head lowered so far she might have buried it in her neck. Lei Nuo turned to look at her, his eyes gentle. The engagement was set for start of summer. Newspapers printed their photograph, their heads leaning together, smiling at the camera. Below the picture were the words "united in eternal matrimony." She cut it out and kept it in her book, looking at it every day, never growing tired of it, her heart filled with joy. There was a banquet at the mansion, intimate beyond words. She looked up at him. Half his face was bathed in light, a smile on his lips, his eyes slanting slightly. When he looked down at her, his gaze still held the gentle teasing of his teenage years. At that moment, she thought fate had been fair to her. Because of him, she could let go of all the hurts of the past. But colored clouds scatter easily. Glass is fragile, all sweet dreams wake too soon. November brought a chill to the nights. Madame Lei had caught a cold, feeling unwell, and hadn't eaten dinner. Fu Lily was worried, so she stopped by to check on her before going to bed. Before she got close, she saw Lei Nuo and several men in military uniforms walking down the steps. She hid behind a tree, planning to wait until they left before approaching. Aka drove up from behind. The man at the front turned to shake Lei Nuo's hand. Standing to the side, Fu Lily saw his face clearly. It was him, the man who had assassinated her father under the pretense of peace talks. Her eyes widened in disbelief, frozen in shock. She gripped the branch in front of her so tightly her knuckles turned white, as if she would rush out at any second. The car drove away. Lei Nuo let out a long breath and turned around only to hear a sharp snap. He walked forward a few steps and saw her standing behind the tree. She still held a broken branch in her hand, fingers clenched, knuckles pale. His heart jolted, but he showed nothing on his face. He reached out to take her hand. "Why are your hands so cold?" He covered both her hands with his own, holding them tightly. She looked up at him. All the questions he needed to ask were in her eyes. Never had she stared at him with such grief, such silent accusation. "Lily," he said in a low voice, "things are bad outside. We cannot stand aside." Her body trembled. She gritted her teeth and spoke word by word. Why him? Over the years they had become mortal enemies of the Fu clan. The Sun clan's march north was inevitable. If the Fu and Sun clans allied, the Lei would be in grave danger. Their only choice was to align with the Murong clan, defeat the Sun and Fu in one strike. After that, the Lei and Murong would leave each other in peace, recuperate, and let the people live in stability for a time. But how could he explain all this to her? She trembled even harder. He frowned and put an arm around her. "It's drafty here. Come inside, and I'll explain everything." She didn't move. Herder Kai stared steadily at him, tears welling up. She held back fiercely and spoke each word clearly. "When I was 12, I watched him kill my father with my own eyes." She would never forget how her mother had shielded her tightly in her arms. She would never forget her father, lying in a pool of blood, struggling to turn his head to look at her and her mother. No one had expected the always gentle Fu Lily to have such a stubborn side. Neither Madame Lei nor the elder sisters could persuade her. She remained silent and unyielding. Chaos reigned outside. Mr. Lei used her secret key to open the Fu clan banks, releasing massive quantities of gold bars. Industries across the 3 Jiangxi provinces were affected. The Sun clan had raised an army backed by Russia. Every day, progressive youth and radicals gave speeches and held marches in the streets. Even opera houses were sealed shut. When Lei Nuo rushed back, she had not eaten or drunk for 3 days. Having lost a great deal of weight, she sat on the bed, her back straight, a thin silhouette from the side. Looking at her, his throat tightened painfully. A servant brought congee and side dishes. He fed her himself, holding the spoon to her lips, but she refused stubbornly to open her mouth. "I tested it," he said. It's not hot this time. He killed my father. I haven't avenged him yet. She clutched her chest, tears streaming down her face. Lei and Yuo, I'm begging you. It was the first time she had called him by his given name. Lei Yuo's heart felt like it was being sliced open, the pain almost suffocating. After a long while, he put down the bowl, took her hand and said, "Come. I'll take you outside to look." He drove her out himself. Soldiers in neat uniforms stood guard on the streets. They sat in the car, from bright afternoon to approaching dusk. She looked at his side profile, the 16-year-old boy who had ridden her on a bicycle, grinning mischievously. Now, traces of hardship lined his face. He frowned, his expression complicated and unreadable. He had his ambitions, his country and the world. She had her father's murder to avenge. Between them lay the irreversible chaos of war. Their love was nothing but a moon reflected in water, a flower in a mirror. Last night, I dreamed of my father, she sobbed. He turned his back to me. I called him, but he wouldn't answer. I ran to pull him, and he said, "I have no daughter like you." She covered her face and cried uncontrollably. Lei Yuo clenched his fists, filled with powerlessness and defeat. He turned and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly he wished he could merge her into his body. In that moment, he even hoped the world would end, that they would die locked in each other's arms, pure and untainted, just the two of them. They fell into a stalemate. Fu Lili refused to see him, or anyone from the Lei family. She stayed in her room all day. Every time Lei Yuo came, she locked him out. Once, he got drunk outside and crashed the door open. It was late at night. He burst in with a chill. Fu Lili sat up in bed, startled, clutching the quilt. He stared at her, his eyes bloodshot. Suddenly he leaned down and pressed his cold lips to hers. Fu Lili's heart jolted, intense emotion surging through her. He took the chance to pry her mouth open, his tongue slipping inside. She stiffened as if electrocuted, then struggled to push him away. In the darkness, she fought him silently. Their movements grew violent. He pressed her down completely, pinning her hands above her head. Filled with hatred, she bit down hard. Lei Yuo flinched in pain and had to stop. He looked down at her. She bit her lip, tears shining in her eyes. Bright and stunning. His heart felt as if it were being squeezed hard, sour and aching. He buried his face in her neck, then stood up silently and left. Epilogue. Many things happened in those 6 months. Fu Clan banks collapsed one after another. Southern industries suffered heavy losses. A major battle broke out in Zahus, and the Murong and Lakelands formed an alliance, planning to seize the railways and invade the south. All of this was kept from Fu Lili. Yet no one expected that she would be the first to learn that Fu Clan forces had entered the city. A letter was tied to a kite, which flew straight into the mansion and landed right at her feet. After reading it, she sat quietly in her room the entire afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the window, warm and bright. She thought back to the days when she had been ill years ago. Time had not grown old, peace had reigned. The best days between her and him were already long gone. Dusk approached, the sky growing dark. Fu Lili told the driver to take her out. As the car left the official residence, she looked back deeply. In life, there is no perfect way to live up to one's beliefs and to the one you love. The eldest son of the Fu clan, her cousin, was waiting for her at a hotel. There was no affection left between them, but she had come because he said he would help her avenge her father. He was right about one thing: no matter how badly the Fu family had treated her and her mother, her father had been the best father in the world. Fu Jin had already prepared clothes for her. As the young mistress of the Lei family, she could easily enter the banquet hosted by the Murong clan. She changed and stepped out of the room. Fu Jin handed her a pistol. "Act when the lights go out. My men will rush in during the chaos." She glanced at him, then took the gun and hid it in her handbag. Meanwhile, Lei Yuo was in a meeting in Shuangqiao. By the time it ended, the moon was high in the sky. Before he left, his secretary remembered something and said the young mistress call. Lei Yuo froze. then spun around and rushed over Wen. Why didn't you tell me earlier? The secretary was stunned by his urgency and stammered. She hung up after hearing you were in a meeting. Yuo frowned, pushed the secretary aside, and hurried outside. Once in the car, he ordered the driver Maishin Mansion. When they arrived, he jumped out before the car even stopped, rushing straight to Fu Lila's room. Lily, he pushed open the slightly ajar door. The room was empty. A vase of fresh lilies sat on the desk, their fragrance filling the air. He turned and saw the kite beside the vase. From Maishin Mansion to the Murong residence, it was the longest journey of Lei Nuo's life. The car raced along, nearly hitting pedestrians several times. But he didn't care. All he could think of was her the first time she called him third brother, the first time she smiled at him. Memories flooded his mind, robbing him of breath. For the first time in his life, he felt pure terror, but he was too late. By the time he arrived, the Murong residence was in chaos. The grand, brightly lit hall was surrounded by soldiers. Lei Nuo rushed in and saw Fu Lily lying in the middle of the living room at once. She wore a pearl-white kipo, her long hair loose, blood staining her chest, her face deathly pale. At the sight of him, she forced a smile. Lei Nuo knelt and lifted her into his arms. Lily. Third brother, she blinked. You're here. He buried his face in her neck, his heart burning like fire, every organ twisting in pain. How could you do this? Lily, how could you? Her neck was cold and damp. Lily remembered what Fu Jin had written in the letter the Lei family. And Lei Nuo marrying you, they only want the Fu clan's secret key in your hands. Do you really think he loves you? He lifted his head from her chest and looked at Murong Dwen, sitting in a chair ahead. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression terrifying, like an Asura from hell. Third brother, she whispered. There was one question she had always wanted to ask him. Third brother, when you married me, were you happy? She had never had the chance before, and now she never would. But in this moment she understood. It no longer mattered. Life is but a grand dream. She was grateful he had once dreamed it with her. Third brother, all these years loving you, I was truly happy.